Hi friends, my name's Chris, and instead of a book club or a proper PowerPoint presentation like I usually do, I'm just going to ramble a tiny bit about a paper that I've kind of been thinking about or that's been in the back of my mind. Thomas Nagel's Moral Luck. So I hope you guys enjoy the 2-second ramble. So imagine this. Two people drive home drunk. Same level of intoxication, same recklessness, same decision. One of these people or one person makes it home safely. The other person hits a pedestrian on their way home. Now, we don't judge these two people the same, and that should bother us, or so Nagel is suggesting here. And this is the starting point for what he calls moral luck, or this discussion of moral luck, this introduction of it. Essentially, moral luck is the idea that factors outside of our control affect how we end up being judged morally and our moral standing. Even though it's pretty common to think of morality as something that demands control, demands agency, and demands choice. We like to think that we're only responsible for what we choose to do, the actions we either engage in or don't engage in. That's what we should be judged off of. But in practice, we're constantly judged, and we constantly judge people for things that they didn't choose, for the outcomes of actions, for instance, the circumstances under which certain actions were taken, the character traits behind the individual who was making these choices, and then even as far as the causal history that led up to certain choices being made. And so Nagel's claim here, it's not that we can easily fix this. It's a little bit more serious. I think he's saying here. He's saying that moral luck isn't some sort of one-off or some sort of little like hiccup in the way we think morally. He thinks it's like a fundamental and essential property of moral thinking, something that we can't really get rid of, and that's just a part of moral thinking. And so he introduces or he talks about four different types of moral luck. Before I'll talk about the four types of moral luck, or was it three? I think it was four. The four types of moral luck. First, he introduces the control principle, and I think most people can kind of get on board with this one. It's not too um, too strange of a premise to accept. He says that we should only be morally assessed for what's under our control. So if I didn't choose to do something, if I didn't engage in something willingly, I shouldn't be morally put to trial for that thing. If you didn't choose it, if you didn't intend it, if you didn't cause it voluntarily somehow, then it shouldn't really affect your moral standing too much. That sounds fair at face value. However, pretty obviously, it doesn't take too much imagination to realize that we don't actually live by this principle, right? And then here are some examples that he kinds of give, or the types of moral lucks that would threaten this control principle that we kind of seem to intuit. And so, let's take the example of the drunk driver. So he's someone who's judged far more harshly, put to prison even, or sentenced to life, than one who doesn't hit someone. Maybe they'll just get away with a DUI. And this isn't because both of their intentions were worse. Obviously, he didn't want to hit someone and kill someone. And it's not because their characters were worse. Obviously, they kind of ended up making the same irresponsible decision, either by drinking too much to be able to drive soberly or by just getting behind the wheel drunk. And it's not really an outcome. And since this outcome isn't one that they. And since the outcome is something that they didn't control, then this seems kind of like there seems to be some sort of friction or tension here going on. And so we can know intellectually or like within reason that that both of them were under the same circumstances. One just kind of got unlucky maybe. But our moral reactions to it don't disappear. We don't all of a sudden say, "Oh, you know what? Let's lighten up his sentence. Let's get him out of jail and just give him a DUI." And so outcomes matter morally, even when, if we agree on the control principle, they shouldn't. And so circumstantial luck is the next type of luck he talks about. And this is an interesting one, actually, I thought. I think this is like the most interesting one to me. And it's the type of luck that that's involved in the situations you happen to face. So obviously some people are put under extreme um, situations and circumstances with extreme moral pressures, like life or death, saving the life of people type thing. Others never even come close to that degree of like moral pressure. And so we end up praising courage greatly. We put like a strong importance on it and on people who act bravely and heroically. But only some people, only very, very few people are actually ever in the situations which would allow them to act heroically. We also, on the other hand, condemn being a coward or cowardice. And it's, only sometimes are people put in situations where cowardice is even possible. Sometimes there's no way out and you have to act bravely or heroically. And so what he's saying here is that a lot of us live relatively morally clean lives where we never have you could call it an opportunity, or you can call it the burden of acting um, in these ways that would bring about intense moral judgments. And I think that's a bit uncomfortable. He's suggesting here that the moral record that you have, your moral standing almost, depends at least in part by opportunity and the circumstances in which you were placed in, like the scenarios you were faced with. The next moral luck he kind of talks about, and I'll go quickly more or less, is that of constitutive moral luck. And this is the one that's concerned a little bit with like the person you are, the type of person you are, the character traits that you have. So like very Aristotelian, things like your temperament, your impulses, your emotional range, wisdom, intelligence, and so on and so on. And he says that you don't choose these things wholly. Obviously, we could probably agree that there is some degree of exercise and cultivation that you can engage in to, you know, make yourself a bit more courageous or more intelligent or more uh, empathic. But at the end of the day, there are factors that influence these character traits that are beyond us. Genetic things would just be like a clear example. And so Nagel's point here, it's not so much that like character doesn't matter, but character itself, there is a component of luck in there. We inherit ourselves. We inherit a lot of our traits, a lot of character traits. Um, and so maybe we should be judged wholly based off of our character. The last one is causal moral luck, and this is kind of adjacent to like determinism, right? So if you kind of agree that there's a causal chain of events in the world, that one thing leads to another one, and so on and so on and so on, and then you include moral choices and moral decisions, actions in this type of causal chain, then they are all results of prior causes. Any type of decision you have, or any type of action you kind of engage in. And so things like your upbringing or your brain, your environment, the state of the world, even, um, all of these things influence or could lead to certain actions. And if you push this far enough, then you end up kind of, face to face or having to deal with or grapple with just hard determinism or determinism, or more like a type of like moral determinism. And so, if everything has to do with some sort of causal explanation, then in what sense could we have done otherwise? And so, obviously, he doesn't expand too much on the free will debate. I have other videos if you guys care about that stuff, but he wants to note it or highlight it that at least it's like a possible issue here or a threat. And so the last the core tension, or like the final little bit that he leaves us with or has us think about, is that, well, if we take this control principle, this idea that for us to be morally judged, we need to have some sort of agency, voluntary predisposition, or like or acting, or like a choice, or like just something from us, coming from us to act. If we take this control principle seriously, then moral responsibility seems to kind of get a bit shaky because there's a lot of things that just aren't in our control. And if we abandon it, then morality just seems almost unfair because people who are praised might just be blamed for luck. People who act heroically might just be, told that they got morally lucky instead of actually being a person worthy of this praise. And so he's essentially saying that there's no easy way or clean way to remove luck from morality, or at least I would argue from moral judgments. That's a bit of a safer claim, without losing something essential or fundamental. And so, in his own words, he says that moral judgments are contaminated by luck, not accidentally but structurally. That's basically all I had for today. I hope you guys like the ramble. I'll go ahead and link that paper down below. It's a super famous one. I'm sure most you're presented to it in undergrad, but it's a fun read and a pretty central one to like moral philosophy. Anyways, next week hopefully we'll do a proper book club presentation with a PowerPoint and all that. But yeah, have a nice week. Bye.